What do you do when someone you built your life around decides they've outgrown you, right in front of everyone you love? My name is Jonathan Blake. I'm 58 years old. You've probably never heard of me, and that's intentional. I've spent most of my adult life working in the background, quietly investing in ideas that became companies, guiding teams, solving problems, and avoiding the spotlight. I believe in structure, in strategy, in showing up. My wife, Melanie, once said she admired that about me. But admiration has a short shelf life when someone starts chasing intensity instead of stability. Last week, at our son's graduation dinner, a private rooftop reception in Manhattan for close friends and family, Melanie stood beside a man 15 years younger than her and announced, without flinching, that she was leaving me. "He understands me," she said. Jonathan doesn't feel anything anymore. The music stopped. The servers froze. My son, Eli, looked like someone had punched him in the chest. And me? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to her. I had been waiting for this moment. Not with anger, with preparation, because I had seen this coming, and I had been planning her exit long before she planned mine. Melanie hesitated as she took the envelope from my hand. For a moment, the breeze caught the corner of it, tugging it slightly, like even the wind sensed what was inside. She glanced at the handwriting, hers, from years ago. I had kept that particular envelope folded neatly between layers of documents, in my safe, waiting for the moment when everything she thought she controlled would slip right through her fingers. "What is this?" she asked, loud enough for the room to hear, though her voice cracked around the edges. I didn't answer. I simply looked at her and nodded. She opened it. Carefully at first, but then faster, her fingers shaking. Page 1 was enough. Her eyes narrowed. Page 2 made her jaw tighten. By the time she got to page 3, the flush of power that had carried her through her little speech vanished from her face. "You need to read it out loud," I said, calm, composed, not cruel, just matter of fact. People were still standing, holding champagne glasses mid-toast. Her spiritual advisor, Asher, who had been hovering too close, suddenly took half a step back, as if sensing something he hadn't anticipated. He had thought this would be the evening Melanie claimed a new identity, the moment she publicly aligned with her truth. Instead, she was unraveling. Melanie looked around the room. Her mother was there. Our son, our longtime friends, business partners, people who knew me as the dependable, quiet one, the man who built everything without needing to announce it. Her voice dropped. "Jonathan, you didn't—" "I did," I replied softly. "And I did it months ago." I watched her eyes move across the third page again, scanning for loopholes that weren't there. Everything was spelled out with clean precision: the transfer of property to Eli, the asset restructuring, the irrevocable trust, and the notarized statements affirming full legal counsel and consent on her part from 5 years ago, when we had signed the marital asset agreement after refinancing the townhouse. A single cough from one of the servers broke the silence. "You set me up," she whispered. "No," I said. "You walked into the life you chose. I just made sure you wouldn't take mine or Eli's with you." And that was the moment she realized this wasn't her story to control anymore. It was mine. Melanie and I met at Stanford in the late 80s. She was studying communications. I was working toward a double major in mathematics and philosophy. She said I was the only guy on campus who listened more than he talked. I found that ironic, coming from someone who could turn ordering coffee into a 10-minute story. But I liked that about her. She had a gift for making things seem bigger than they were, more vivid, more alive. I was drawn to her energy. She said I grounded her. We graduated together and moved to New York. I joined a startup tech firm as an analyst. She landed a junior role at a media agency and hated it almost instantly. Too many meetings, not enough meaning, she'd say. Eventually, she left to explore freelance marketing, then nonprofit consulting, then branding strategy. Nothing stuck, but it never worried me. I was doing well, quietly, consistently. I wasn't flashy about it. While others in my field were buying lofts and Aston Martins, I invested in long-term plays, advised startups on the side, made friends-in-law, tech, finance. By 40, I had sold equity in 3 firms and set up a trust for our son's education. We bought a townhouse in Tribeca. Clean lines, lots of light. Melanie loved the idea of curating our space. Her word, not mine. She threw dinner parties, planned getaways to places with names like Stillwater Canyon and The Quiet Farm. I handled the details. She didn't think about mortgage renewals, property taxes, investment portfolios. She once told a friend that I was the infrastructure of her life. At the time, I took it as a compliment. When Eli was born, she became a full-time mother. She was wonderful at it, present, attentive, wildly creative. Our son grew up surrounded by books and music and warmth. I never once doubted her commitment to him. But after he went off to college, something in Melanie changed. She stopped organizing the house, spent more time in wellness forums online, talked often about people vibrating at higher frequencies. At first, I thought it was harmless. She signed up for a silent retreat in Big Sur, came back glowing, talking about healing old energies and rewriting personal narratives. I didn't pretend to understand it, but I supported it. She seemed happier, lighter. If hiking in the mountains with strangers helped her reconnect with herself, I wasn't going to stand in the way. But over time, her search for meaning became something else, something more urgent, more performative. She joined Private Online, groups that hosted energy cleanse weekends in Costa Rica, and private Zoom sessions on abundance consciousness. She started recording herself meditating and posting it to curated audiences. She insisted on changing the feng shui of the kitchen, burned sage in the study I worked from, and once told me I was emotionally stagnant. I asked her what that meant. "You're consistent," she said with a tight smile. "But consistency is not the same as presence." I didn't respond. I'd learned over the years that Melanie didn't want solutions, she wanted resonance, and if I couldn't offer that, she'd seek it elsewhere. That elsewhere turned out to be a weekend seminar in Santa Fe, led by a man named Asher Hale, a former yoga instructor turned life coach with a 7-day retreat package that promised identity realignment and spiritual rebirth. I found out later it cost nearly $8,000. Melanie described him as a deeply intuitive presence. "He's helped me reconnect with the parts of me I've forgotten," she said. "He sees through people. He sees through me." It didn't alarm me then. I thought it was a phase. Another wave of purpose-seeking that would eventually give way to something practical. It always had before. Then came the upgrades. New wardrobe, looser fabrics, earthy tones, a jade necklace she wore every day, a tattoo on her wrist, a line of Sanskrit I couldn't translate. Asher had become a regular name in her conversations, at first in passing, then with reverence. Asher says the ego resists change because it fears the death of identity. Asher thinks I've been playing small for too long. I asked once directly if something was happening between them. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. "He sees me," she said. "When was the last time you did?" That sentence landed harder than I expected. And for a moment I questioned everything. Myself, my choices, my way of moving through the world. But then I remembered. I had built this life for both of us, with care, with effort, with integrity. I had given her every opportunity to evolve, to explore. What I hadn't realized until then was that she didn't just want evolution. She wanted an audience, and I had never been one. That was the moment I started watching closely, not with anger, but with clarity. Something had shifted, and I knew I had to be ready, because this wasn't just a search for meaning anymore. This was a slow-motion exit, and whether she knew it yet or not, she had already packed her bags. It started with a missed call. Melanie had been in Sedona for a vibrational clarity retreat, which, according to her, was strictly digital-free. No phones, no laptops, just silence, crystals, and inner realignment. But late that night, I saw her phone light up on the kitchen counter. The screen flashed a name I didn't recognize. Asher, new number. The call ended quickly, but the voicemail preview lingered long enough for me to read. You didn't need to lie. He won't understand your path anyway. I didn't listen to the message. I didn't have to. The tone was clear enough. So I did something uncharacteristic for me. I opened her laptop. She rarely logged out. Inside her browser history were links to private coaching groups, encrypted chat threads, and a reservation confirmation for a boutique hotel in Santa Fe. 2 guests, 3 nights. The dates overlapped with the supposed Sedona trip. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and went over everything I'd missed. Every conversation I'd dismissed as harmless. Every moment when I thought she was simply drifting and would return on her own. The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention. Melanie had become bolder. She took workshops in the city that ran late into the night. She bought a new phone for business that she never let out of her sight. I noticed our shared calendar had been edited, events quietly deleted. She started wearing perfume again, something citrusy, floral, unfamiliar. She was careful with her words, but not careful enough. Then Eli came home unexpectedly one weekend from school. He had just finished midterms and said he needed a change of scenery. We ordered Thai food and watched an old movie, and for the first time in a while, the house felt familiar. Until he walked into the kitchen and overheard Melanie on the phone. She was laughing, open, youthful laughter, the kind you don't fake. Once the ceremony's done, we'll have clarity, she said. It'll all be easier. I saw Eli freeze. He didn't say anything then, but later, as we loaded the dishwasher, he asked, "Is Mom okay?" I didn't answer directly. "She's going through something," I said, "trying to find herself." "Does that include someone else?" That's when I knew the truth was no longer mine alone to manage. Whatever Melanie was building with Asher, it wasn't just emotional. It was strategic, and I had to be too. The next morning, I called my attorney. A quiet, detail-obsessed man I'd known for 15 years. I told him we needed to begin preparing a contingency plan. "For what?" he asked. "For the moment," I said, "when this stops being spiritual and starts being legal." Because Melanie wasn't just realigning her energy anymore. She was positioning herself for a clean break. And I wasn't going to let her take everything I'd spent a lifetime building with her on the way out. My attorney's name is Howard Levin. He's the kind of man who doesn't waste adjectives. We met years ago during a board dispute where his precision dismantled a hostile takeover attempt with nothing but documentation and calm. He's brilliant, quiet, and relentless. Exactly the kind of person you want when your life is about to be tested, not in a courtroom, but in real time, in front of everyone who matters. I didn't come to him with rage. I came with data, travel receipts, credit card charges, encrypted email printouts, a timeline. Nothing speculative, nothing emotional. Just the truth, recorded and sorted. Howard reviewed everything in silence, then nodded once. "We're not fighting her," he said. "We're outmaneuvering her." The next few weeks became a strategic blur. We dusted off the marital asset agreement Melanie and I had signed 5 years earlier during a property refinance, at my insistence. Then she called it unnecessary. I called it practical. She signed it while sipping Pinot Grigio on our back patio, never imagining it would one day be the framework for her financial isolation. That agreement stated that in the event of infidelity, documented and verified, shared assets acquired during the marriage would revert fully to the non-offending party. She had laughed when she signed it, said I watched too many legal dramas. I kept a copy in my safe and another in a secure cloud archive. Howard made sure it was updated, notarized, and enforceable. Then we moved to protect the real assets. I began transferring ownership of our townhouse and vacation home in Cape Cod into a domestic asset protection trust, one that named Eli as the primary beneficiary and myself as trustee. We looped in a financial planner to reroute retirement and investment holdings into discrete instruments protected by estate law. Melanie, who had always left our finances to me with a breezy, "I trust you," had no idea what she was no longer entitled to. Next came the accounts. I opened a new line of banking under a holding LLC, perfectly legal, perfectly separate, and moved liquid assets into that structure, leaving just enough in the joint account to avoid suspicion. Melanie didn't notice. She rarely checked. But perhaps the most important move was psychological. I said nothing. I acted the same. I made dinner. I asked about her retreats. I nodded when she spoke about energetic realignment. Every night I played the part of the man she thought she'd outgrown. Meanwhile, I built the stage for her performance, down to the lighting. We planned the reveal carefully. Eli's graduation was the perfect storm of timing, emotion, and symbolism. She would expect to make her exit as the enlightened woman choosing her truth. She'd imagine it as her final act of boldness. What she didn't know was that the ending had already been written. All I had to do was hand her the script, because when someone plans to burn down the house, you don't argue with them. You quietly move the valuables, document everything, and wait until they light the match. Melanie thought she was orchestrating her rebirth. She had no idea I'd already choreographed her landing. It was a warm Saturday evening in early May, and the rooftop restaurant overlooking the Hudson was glowing with soft amber lights and the kind of curated ambiance you only get when money meets taste. We had reserved the entire upper level for Eli's law school graduation celebration. Close friends, family, a few mentors. Everything had been planned down to the final detail. The seating chart, the custom menu, the violinist playing near the balcony. Melanie had taken full control of the aesthetics. She wore a flowing ivory dress that looked more like something out of a wellness commercial than an evening event. And around her neck was a thick silver pendant she claimed was an energy amulet blessed by a shaman. She moved through the room gracefully, rehearsed in her presentation, greeting guests like a woman floating slightly above reality. Eli was radiant. His name had just been added to the Wall of Excellence at Columbia, and he'd already secured a position at a respected firm. As far as he knew, this evening was about him, his future, and our pride as parents. And that's exactly why it mattered. I didn't want to ruin it, but I also wasn't going to allow Melanie to rewrite the story in her favor at his expense. The first sign came when Asher walked in. He was dressed in a designer blazer and open collar, linen shirt, confident, polished, and completely out of place. He made his way to the bar, clearly trying not to draw attention, though his presence was anything but subtle. Several heads turned. Melanie's gaze followed him almost involuntarily, a flicker of anticipation tightening the corners of her eyes. At some point between the appetizers and the toasts, Melanie stood up. She gently tapped her glass with a fork, and the soft chime drew the room's attention. She took a breath like she was about to deliver something deeply personal, meaningful. And she did, just not in the way she intended. "I want to say something," she began, her voice light but amplified by the hush in the room. "Tonight isn't just about our son's incredible achievement, though that is the heart of this celebration. Tonight is also about stepping into new chapters, about living with truth and honoring what no longer serves us." That was the moment, the shift. She glanced at Asher. Subtle, but not subtle enough. "I've spent a long time playing roles," she continued, "and tonight I choose to let one of them go." Her voice trembled just slightly. The practiced vulnerability of someone convinced she was about to be applauded for her bravery. "I'm leaving my marriage," she said, "because I've outgrown it. And I've found someone who—" That was when I stood. I didn't interrupt loudly. I didn't raise my hand or call her name. I just calmly reached into the inside pocket of my blazer and pulled out the envelope. Black. Sealed. I walked it over to her and handed it without a word. Melanie looked confused. The narrative she'd scripted didn't include this. Still, she opened it. The room was utterly silent. Forks paused mid-air. Even the violinist seemed unsure whether to continue playing. Eli's face had gone pale. As Melanie flipped through the pages, I watched the shift happen in real time. The first page, the post-nuptial agreement. Her signature. Witnessed, notarized. Her eyes darted to mine. The second page. Asset transfers. Property, trusts, financial statements. She skimmed faster. Then the third page. A legal notice affirming the house, the Cape property, and all liquid assets had been moved into irrevocable protection, structured entirely for Eli's benefit. It was a document filed 2 weeks earlier, effective immediately. She froze. "Jonathan," she whispered, suddenly small. "Read it out loud," I said gently. "Since we're being honest tonight." She didn't. Couldn't. Her hands were trembling now. "You can't do this," she muttered, louder this time. "You can't just—" "I didn't do anything outside the agreement you signed," I said calmly. "I just took your advice." I realigned. From the corner of the room, Asher stood straighter, sensing his cue had passed. The role he thought he'd play had vanished. Melanie looked over at him, searching for backup, but he stayed silent. I turned to him. "You're free to go," I said. "Though you might want to tell Melanie what you told the other 2 women who filed complaints." With the coaching board, there was a ripple through the room. Murmurs. Someone gasped quietly. "What is he talking about?" Melanie demanded. Asher didn't answer. Instead, he slowly walked toward the exit, his posture no longer confident, just controlled. He didn't look back. Melanie's eyes followed him like she had just realized she was clinging to a raft with a hole in it. Eli stood. "Is this real?" he asked me, voice tight. "Yes," I said, "every word, every page." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because tonight was supposed to be about you." "I waited because I wanted you to have one moment untouched by this." Melanie's face twisted. "You blindsided me. You humiliated me." "No," I said. "You did that when you tried to hijack your own son's celebration to stage a personal transformation story. I just brought receipts." She looked around the room. People she knew. People who knew us. No one smiled. No one nodded. Even her. Mother turned away. And just like that, the woman who had planned to exit her marriage as a goddess in full bloom now stood there as what she truly was. Unprepared, exposed, and alone. I sat back down. The violinist resumed slowly. The air had changed, but the night moved on. Not with chaos. With clarity. Melanie didn't leave right away. She stood for several long seconds, still holding the envelope, her hands trembling slightly as if the weight of it was something physical. But the silence that followed wasn't sympathetic, it was damning. Our guests had become an unintentional jury, and their expressions said everything. What had begun as a celebration had turned into an awakening, and not the kind she had wanted. Mother was the first to speak. "Melanie," she said, her voice firm but not loud, "you've embarrassed yourself." Melanie blinked, stunned. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," her mother interrupted. "And frankly, I'm tired of pretending not to." It was a moment of brutal clarity. Her carefully curated world of affirmation quotes, guided meditations, and emotionally charged monologues had collapsed under the weight of something she never anticipated. Facts. Asher had already vanished down the service elevator. He left behind nothing, not a word, not an excuse, not even eye contact. I'd done my research on him. There were formal complaints against him for emotional manipulation and financial exploitation. Melanie, in all her searching, had chosen a man whose spiritual guidance came with legal disclaimers. The rest of the evening felt suspended. People ate quietly. No one toasted. A few close friends came over to Eli and me, offering awkward words of support. Melanie sat at the edge of the table, isolated. Her posture collapsed inward, the envelope still beside her untouched dessert. By the end of the night, she tried to salvage something. "Jonathan," she said as I helped Eli into his coat. "We should talk." I met her eyes. "We just did." And then I walked away, not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to clarify. In the days that followed, word spread. Melanie's circles, those curated social media groups filled with soft focus photos and mantras, began to thin. Screenshots of her failed. Alignment surfaced online. Someone had recorded a snippet of her announcement from that evening. Another had shared details of the coaching scandal tied to Asher. By the end of the week, her so-called rebranding was more cautionary tale than empowerment narrative. She tried to reclaim her platform, posting a video titled, "When Truth Gets Twisted." Comments were disabled within the hour. Meanwhile, Eli told me something I won't forget. "I always thought you were quiet because you didn't feel things," he said. "But now I get it. You were quiet because you felt everything and handled it." The damage wasn't just financial or social, it was reputational. Melanie had gambled her dignity for a dramatic reinvention and lost. And the worst part for her wasn't that she didn't get what she wanted. It was that she no longer had anyone left to applaud her when she tried. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives wearing a tailored suit with signed documents, delivered by the very man you thought too boring to fight back. Turns out he just fought smarter. The house was quieter after she left. Not in the hollow, lonely way people talk about after a breakup, but in the honest, breathable way you notice when static finally disappears from the air. Melanie moved out within a week, though technically there was nothing left for her to claim. The townhouse was in Eli's name. The accounts were sealed. The trust was active. Legally, it was over before she even realized it had begun. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. Eli stayed with me for a few days after graduation, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. We fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, cooked late dinners, and watched old courtroom dramas together. He laughed when I paused episodes to explain the real law behind the Hollywood dialogue. It was the kind of simple, wordless connection I hadn't realized I'd been missing, not just as a father, as a man. Melanie called once. No apologies, no admissions, just a vague statement about wanting to clear the air. I told her there was nothing to clear. "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said. "It's a conclusion." She cried briefly. Then she hung up. Weeks passed. Her social accounts went silent. Word came through a mutual friend that she was working part-time at a wellness shop in Brooklyn, selling hand-poured candles and essential oils. Asher had, predictably, moved on, apparently to someone younger. I didn't laugh at that, not out loud, but it didn't surprise me either. Eli returned to the city in late summer to begin his new job. Before he left, we sat on the back steps of the townhouse, 2 beers between us, the city humming in the background. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," I said, and I meant it. I looked around. The garden Melanie once filled with succulents was now blooming with wild lavender. Eli's doing. The walls were quieter, the air easier. I had built this life on discipline, intention, and patience. It nearly unraveled because I underestimated how badly some people crave applause for destroying their own stage. But I had also rebuilt. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't anger or confrontation or chaos. Sometimes it's peace. Earned, not given. And mine was finally quiet. Betrayal doesn't always look like shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it wears the face of someone smiling across the dinner table, speaking about alignment and truth, while quietly preparing to abandon the very life you built together. But the lesson here isn't about revenge. It's about clarity, about preparation, about knowing that justice isn't a storm, it's a scalpel. And when wielded with patience, it cuts clean. Jonathan didn't retaliate with rage. He didn't try to match drama with drama. He responded with strategy, integrity, and quiet power. That's what made his story unforgettable. Because in a world that often rewards volume and spectacle, sometimes the most powerful response is composed silence, backed by undeniable truth. One viewer might put it this way: he didn't just protect himself, he protected his peace. And that's what real strength looks like. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on who in your life truly shows up, even when no one's watching. Then share your thoughts below. We read every comment. And some of the most powerful moments in these stories come from you.